Hey, why are we in Syria? You ever wonder? You ever wonder why we're even there? I'll tell you why. I bet it has something to do with oil. So there's two pipelines. We're going to talk about that are going through. One's from Iran, one's from Saudi Arabia, and they both want to go through Syria. Son of a gun. Turns out that's why we're there. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wrote an article recently in Politico, and he says why the Arabs don't want us in Syria. They don't hate our freedoms. They hate what we've betrayed our ideals in their own countries for oil. That's right. They hate that we've betrayed our own ideals in their own countries for oil. And so he goes on. There's so many things about this I didn't know. He talks about how we overthrew. First of all, he says, as the New York Times reported in December 8th, 2015, front page story, the Islamic State political leaders and strategic planners are working to provoke an American military intervention. So just like with Osama bin Laden and 9/11, he was hoping that America would overreach, just like the Russians did in Afghanistan, and bankrupt ourselves, which is what we're doing, right? All empires end like this. We overextend militarily. And meanwhile, half the country's poor. We're spending trillions of dollars on weapons we don't need and trying to run the whole world, which we just make it worse. Every time we try to fix something, we make it worse. He says they know from experience this will flood their ranks with volunteer fighters, drown the voices of moderation, and unify the Islamic world against America. That's why ISIS wants the United States to have a big military response to anything they do. Because they know this will flood their ranks with volunteer fighters, drown the voices of moderation, and unify the Islamic world. How do we know this? Well, because in 1957, he says, my grandfather, Ambassador Joseph P. Kennedy, sat on a secret committee charged with investigating the CIA's clandestine mischief in the Mideast. The so-called Bruce Lovett report, which we had a hard time finding, to which he was a signatory, described a CIA coup plots in Jordan, Syria, Iran, Iraq, and Egypt. Whew. And by the way, the knowledge of which was all common on the Arab street, but virtually unknown to the American people who believed at face value their government's denials. Oh, Iraq has WMDs, so they do this stuff all the time. And we've been wanting to overthrow those countries forever. The Bruce Lovett report pointed out that such interventions were antithetical to American values and had compromised America's international leadership and moral authority without the knowledge of the American people. The report blamed the CIA for the rampant anti-Americanism that was then mysteriously taking root in many countries in the world. So it turns out if you go to other people's countries and you engineer coups and you overthrow their government, people don't like it. Imagine if Russia came here and engineered a coup. We wouldn't like it. The report also said that the CIA never considered how we would treat such interventions if some foreign government were to engineer them in our country. This is the bloodthirsty history that the modern interventionists like George W. Bush, Ted Cruz, and Marco Rubio miss when they recite their narcissistic trope that Mideast nationalists hate us for our freedoms. They don't hate us for our freedoms. They hate us because we keep effing with them and killing a lot of their people and installing right-wing governments. For the most part, they don't. Instead, they hate us for the way we betrayed those freedoms, our own ideals within their own borders. They mounted a clandestine war against Arab nationalism. Oh, so he goes on to talk about Dulles, right, in the CIA. And he says they mounted a clandestine war against Arab nationalism, which Alan Dulles equated with communism, partly when Arab self-rule threatened oil concessions. Of course. They pumped secret American military aid to tyrants in Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Iraq, and Lebanon, favoring puppets with conservative jihadist ideologies that they regarded as a reliable antidote to Soviet Marxism. So America's CIA was propping up these Islamic radicalists, these guys who would go on to fund terrorists. So they're propping up the most radical of them because they saw them as an antidote to Marxism. So again, we got to stop Marxism. We're going to, just like how we invented Al-Qaeda and ISIS, right? Oh, we want the Mujahideen to fight the Russians. And so we went and recruited them, and then we had the Al-Qaeda. We invented them. At a White House meeting between the CIA's director of plans, Frank Wisner, and John Foster Dulles in September 1957, Eisenhower advised the agency we should do everything possible to stress the holy war aspect. According to him, this is back in the 50s. They wanted to start wars with Arab countries and stress the holy war aspect of it back here at home.
I was going to say, this sounds familiar.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
I feel like I was around when this was going on, and I wasn't around in the 50s.
It's almost like
confused.
It's almost like history is repeating itself. The CIA began its active meddling in Syria in 1949, Ron.
Jeez.
Barely a year after the agency's creation. Syrian patriots had declared war on the Nazis, expelled their Vichy French colonial rulers, and crafted a fragile secularist democracy based on the American model. So they had a secular democracy based on the American model. And what did we do? Well, in March of 1949, Syria's democratically elected president hesitated to approve the Trans-Arabian Pipeline, an American project intended to connect the oil fields of Saudi Arabia to the ports of Lebanon via Syria.
We might not be friends anymore.
In retaliation for their lack of enthusiasm for the U.S. pipeline, the CIA engineered a coup, replacing him with the CIA's hand-picked dictator, a convicted swindler named Husni al-Zalam. I can't say any of these names.
Yeah. So here in the U.S., when you're opposed to a pipeline, you just get strip searched for no reason and mishandled by police. So it's a little different.
Or arrested if you're a journalist.
Yeah, well, I'm charged with 45 years or something like that.
So the guy they put in power, that the United States put in power in Syria, barely had enough time to dissolve parliament and approve the American pipeline before his countrymen deposed him 4.5 months into his regime. 4.5 months in, they got rid of the guy. 2 years earlier, Roosevelt and Stone had orchestrated a coup in Iran against the democratically elected president Mohammad Mossadegh after Mossadegh tried to renegotiate the terms of Iran's lopsided contracts with the British oil giant Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, now BP. So you see what's happening? The countries, the leaders of their countries, want to have the oil for themselves. And England and the United States says, no, you can't. And we're going to overthrow your governments and install strongmen that are puppets. And you wonder why the Mideast is screwed up? They had a democratically elected president in Iran. In fact, Mossadegh was the first elected leader in Iran's 4,000-year history and a popular champion for democracy across the developing world. He was trying to spread democracy, the president of Iran, democratically elected. So what happened to him? Well, we ousted him because he didn't want to give the oil to BP. After ousting him in Operation Ajax, Stone and Roosevelt installed the Shah. The Shah. And the Shah favored U.S. oil companies.
Oh, go figure.
But whose 2 decades of CIA-sponsored savagery toward his own people from the peacock throne would finally ignite in 1979 Islamic Revolution that has bedeviled our foreign policy for 35 years. So, why is Iran, why are they a theocracy? Because we did it. Why is Donald Trump rising? Because our policies are doing it. When half your country is poor, that's who rises to power. Strong men who have they can point a finger and say who's wrong. That's what happened in Iran. We got rid of their democratically and popular elected president for oil. We instituted a puppet, and then he was a horribly repressive leader that we supported. And then they overthrew him and installed a right-wing theocracy.
I have a pretty radical thought here. It's almost like we should learn from the past and maybe not do the oil thing anymore at all. I don't know.
I say you're wrong, Ron.
Crazy thought, I know.
There's more to this, Ron. Flush from his Operation Ajax success in Iran, Stone arrived in Damascus in 1957 with $3 million to arm and incite Islamic militants and to bribe Syrian military officers and politicians to overthrow the democratically elected secularist regime. Working with the Muslim Brotherhood and millions of dollars, Rocky Stone schemed to assassinate Syria's chief of intelligence, the chief of the general staff, and the chief of the Communist Party, and to engineer, quote, national conspiracies and various strong-arm provocations in Iraq, Lebanon, and Jordan that could be blamed on Syria's Baathists. Tim Weiner describes in Legacy of Ashes how the CIA's plan was to destabilize the Syrian government and create a pretext for an invasion by Iraq and Jordan, whose governments were already under CIA control. This is crazy, right?
I'm having deja vu again. I feel like this happened, but at a different time.
I'm feeling like that, too. Kim Roosevelt's forecast that the CIA's newly installed puppet government would rely first upon repressive measures and arbitrary exercise of power. So that's what's going on in the Middle East. If you want to know what's going on in the Middle East, and there's two pipelines that want to go through Syria. One of them's Saudi Arabia, one of them is Iran, and that's what this is all about. And Russia doesn't want that pipeline because they sell a lot of energy to Europe, so they don't want that pipeline happening. That's what this is all over. It's all about money, and it's all about oil.
But alternative energy, we'll just get to it when we get to it.
We'll get to it when we get to it. We need a bridge. We need a bridge. You know that thing that glows that if you stand outside, it'll literally burn you?
Bridges, like all the things falling apart in our country.
We couldn't possibly figure out a way to harness that energy with all... You can sew a guy's dick back on, but somehow we can't figure out how to get a sun. Energy from the sun. Anyway, so that's what's really happening in Syria. That's crazy, right? Isn't that Wow. So why is Iran so screwed up? We screwed it up. Why is Iraq screwed up? We screwed it up. Why is Syria? We screwed it up. Why is Afghanistan? We screwed it up. What haven't we screwed up? The Arab world was on its way to being a democracy, to being secular. Palestinians were secular. And when you constantly oppress them, that creates space for demagogues and right-wingers and strongmen. And that's exactly what the United States does. And then we go, oh, they hate us for our freedom. They hate us for our freedom. They're bad people. Or it's their religion. Sam Harris would say it's their religion. Sam Harris would say, but, you know, the weird thing is they've had the Quran forever. And Iran just turned into a theocracy in 1979. Isn't that weird? So there you go. Thank you, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., for enlightening us on how screwed up everything is. And Hillary Clinton's going to fix everything. We're probably, I don't know, $1 trillion or 2 more bombs. Trillion, maybe 2 trillion. Who knows? She's going to fix it, though. It'll get fixed with bombs. Can't even bring water to Flint, Michigan. We're going to fix. And it's not about fixing it, right? That's because it's not about fixing anything. It's about oil.